Good morning, everybody. Welcome to WorkSafeBC's 2026 rate consultation session. So our intention today is to create a safe space for exchanging knowledge and supporting each other in solidarity. So we welcome questions throughout the webinar, and we're going to be leaving time at the question and answer period at the end of this session to answer your questions. So ACSAFE Safety Association would like to acknowledge and honor that our workplace and classrooms are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kikite, Stalo, Hokiman, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Chemainus peoples. So this session will last about 60 minutes, and that will be followed by an open conversation and question and answer period. All participants are going to be muted. So use the chat feature to submit your questions. And a recording of this webinar will be available on the website, and a link will be emailed to you within a week. So for your convenience, the closed captioning function is available for this webinar. Click the Settings and then Accessibility tab. Under Closed Captionings, click the checkbox to enable. If you have any issues or technical problems with this, please advise our team in the chat room. So the presenters are today, I'm Moretta Alexander. I'm an ACSAFE Safety Advisor. Krista Burke with WorkSafe. Krista manages the Class and Rates Modification Program at WorkSafeBC. And Disha Jaswal at WorkSafeBC. She's been working as a safety consultant for 14 years. So a little bit about ACSAFE. We are a not-for-profit health and safety association, and we support British Columbia's arts and entertainment industries. So for over 25 years, we've collaborated with associations, unions, and government agencies to proudly support over 3,000 employers and 60,000 workers. And we are always here to provide information relevant to you about best practices about working in the arts and entertainment industry in British Columbia. And our vision is to have the safest and healthiest arts and entertainment workplace in the world. And our mission is to prevent and eliminate workplace injury, illness, and death. Our core values are safety, education, accessibility, collaboration, and innovation. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Krista Burke from WorkSafeBC.
Thank you very much, Morette. We can go to the next slide and we can get started. So this is the agenda we'll be working with today. I'm going to start in with the first three items: rate setting and classification, industry rates, experience rating. And then Disha will come in and do industry claim trends, prevention resources, and then I'll come back and speak to return to work. All right, let's get started with rate setting and classification. So I'm going to start off with providing you some of the information on the overall average insurance rate before I focus on and provide details specific to the classification units in these industries. 2024 results are the most recent year statistics that would impact the 2026 rates. And simply is just because 2024 is the last complete year. So looking at some of these key results, we see that the injury rate is 2.02 claims accepted per 100 person years of employment. And when we look at the return to work, we see that 79.7% of workers returning to work within 26 weeks or less. And in terms of our investments, our 2024 results of 11.6% have exceeded our required rate of 4.7%. Now looking at the 2026 preliminary average industry base rate, it is remaining flat at 1.55, and it has been at 1.55 since 2018. So please do keep in mind that this is the industry base rate average for all of BC, not the classification units for these industries specifically. It is derived by taking an average of all of the rates of every classification unit in our system. So does this mean that your industry's rates are also going to be flat? Not necessarily. As with previous years, some employers will see decreases and others will see increases, and a minority will see no change. For this slide, we're still referring to the average base rate of BC. The story told here is that the yellow line, which is the average base rate, has been consistently below the blue line, which is the average cost rate, since 2007. This indicates that favorable investment returns have discounted rates below the cost of the system since then. This is how the surplus is returned to employers as well. $3 billion is expected to be returned between 2019 and 2026. Looking at the overall chart, we're starting to see higher costs similar to 2021 and 2015. Prior to 2015, you would have to go back to 2004 to find a cost rate that was higher. Despite these cost trend concerns, for now, the good news is that 2026 average base rate will continue to remain flat at 1.55. The last message I want to tease out of this slide concerns administration costs. As the red line at the bottom of the graph shows, the administration cost rate has remained consistently flat for the last 20 plus years, playing no role in the changes to the base rate shown in the yellow line above it. Now let's take a look at WorkSafeBC's insurance model. At the foundation of our system is something called a classification unit, or a CU, shown here as the golden block at the bottom of the middle image. Each CU groups together businesses that do similar work, so your peers and your competitors. Now, most industries aren't large enough on their own to have a statistically reliable rate, so we group them into one of our 233 industry groups. Some of these, like forestry, general retail, and hospitals, are big enough to stand alone. In fact, 35 industry groups are large enough to become their own independent rate group. The rest are placed into rate group bands that match their claim cost rate. And the scale on the right-hand side of this slide shows you the range for each of the 20 bands. So in total, we have 55 rate groups, 35 industry-specific ones, and 20 bands. And that's the structure we use to set base rates. And that would be it if nothing changed ever. However, all industries evolve over time and not at the same pace or in the same way. Some get safer and others face new risks. So every year we review industry groups and where they sit. If an industry group's claim costs go up, they move to a higher rate group band, which means higher insurance rates. This helps ensure that each industry is paying a rate that reflects its actual risk, and it also encourages employers to focus on injury prevention. On the flip side, if an industry's claims go down, they move to a lower rate group with lower rates. So what does all this mean for 2026? As mentioned in a previous slide, even though the average rate is staying flat, many industries will see changes. And here's the breakdown. 39% of employers will see their industry rate go down, 47% will see an increase, and 14% will see no change at all. Now, if you've attended a session like this before, you might remember that we usually cap rate changes at 20%. This year, we're doing something a bit different, and rate decreases have been allowed to go up to 40%, while rate increases will be limited to 10%. Now let's get into the industry's rates. We're going to start with the trends of classifications that have a look at the cost component, then have a look, at the cost components for the classifications as well. So starting with motion picture or television, motion picture, commercial or television production industry, this slide shows us that the cost rates and base rates since 2020 have remained close together, but on an upward trend. This slide shows the cost rates and base rates for organizing or conducting special events and live performance venue. These industries are both in rate group 5, and the base rate remains above the cost rate despite a significant decrease in 2026. And last but not least, this slide shows the rates for performing arts. Performing arts was moved to a lower risk rate group for 2023 to reflect the lower claim cost trend, joining, organizing, or conducting special events and live performance venue in rate group 5. Both the cost rate and the base rate decreases are reflective of the CU's transition to the new lower base rate for 2023. Rates continued around this level until the decreased base rate again in 2026. Since joining, organizing, or conducting special event and live performance venue in rate group 5, the rates for all three have since aligned. This is going to be reflected on another slide where we show all the cost components together for these three CUs in 2025 and 2026. So before we get into the cost components for each industry, let's take a look at ACSAFE's historical industry funding levy. For 2023, there is a significant decrease of industry funding in the amount charged into the 2023 rates. This was a result of 2021 ended up having a much larger payroll than forecasted, and therefore it generated a credit. The significant increase in 2025's charged costs is related to the lower payroll resulting from the strike. The levy is expected to come down significantly in 2026 due to unexpectedly higher payroll in 2024 and 2025. So the next couple of slides take us through the cost rate components. Starting with motion picture, commercial, or television production, the base rate increased by 18 cents due to rising claimed costs, partially offset by lower industry funding initiative costs. The large drop that is expected in the industry funding costs for 2026 again are due to higher payroll in 2025 and 2024, which means we collected on more payroll than expected, reducing what is needed for collection in 2026. Diving into this slide, we're starting on the left, and that is the components that make up the total cost rate. This is the percentage of assessable payroll WorkSafeBC must collect to cover the anticipated costs of new claims that are incurred by the rate group in a given rate year, and the future cost of administering those claims. That brings us to the right side, which starts with the total claim cost rate, then further adjusts for items that are specific to the CU, such as the amortization adjustment, which applies the surplus or deficit, and the funding policy adjustment, which applies the capping discussed in the previous slide, and the industry-funded initiatives to apply the levy for those industry-funded programs to come to the base rate. Now, these three CUs now have similar cost components since performing arts joined rate group 5. The only difference was for organizing or conducting special events base rate is that for 2025, it was 1 penny more than the other two classification units due to an additional penny for funding initiatives. Again, we start on the left side with the components that make up the total cost rate. For the amounts that WorkSafeBC collects to cover anticipated costs of new claims for the rate group. Then to the right side, which starts with the total the total cost rate, then further adjusts for items that are specific to the CU, such as the amortization adjustment and the industry-funded initiatives. The base rates for these CUs decreased by 17%, and the main factor being a decrease in the funding initiatives cost resulting from the higher than expected payroll in 2024 and 2025. Now we're going to talk about experience rating. The industry's base rate is just the starting point. What employers actually pay depends on their own safety performance. Our experience rating program looks at the claims history and can give employers a discount of up to 50% or a surcharge of up to 100% based on how the employer is doing. And here's how it works. We look at employers' claim costs over the past 3 years, the size of the employer in terms of payroll, and compare their claim costs per dollar of payroll to the average of the applicable industry. If the claim costs are average, they pay the base rate. If the costs are lower, they get a discount. If they're higher, they get a surcharge. To encourage rate stability, there are a number of dampening measures we apply to the experience rating calculation. And this includes a 3-year window. For 2026, the 3-year window is 2022 to 2024. We also have participation level and capping of claims costs. Let's take a look at an example. If your company has $1 million in payroll and your base rate is 1.03, your premium would be $10,300. But depending on your safety record, you could pay as little as $5,150 or as much as $20,600. And that's a difference of over $15,000. And you can imagine how big the potential savings become as payroll rises. Now I'd like to introduce Disha Jaswal. She'll be taking you through the next set of slides, and I'll see you again for Return to Work. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. So my name is Disha Jaswal, and I am an industry and program specialist at WorkSafeBC. I'll be reviewing some of the industry claim trends within the 4 classification units, including motion pictures, performing arts, organizing and special events, and live performance venues. To begin with, we will be looking at each CU individually, and we'll be comparing each CU to the all BC injury rate. To begin with, we have here a line graph indicating the injury rate on the left-hand side and the years on the x-axis as well. And we can see that in motion pictures, the injury rate is well below the all BC injury rate, which is definitely a positive. However, we do see an increase in 2024 where the injury rate is steeping upwards past the all BC injury rate, which is definitely something to note. And here we have the performing arts CU. When looking at the injury rate, the blue line again represents the all BC injury rate, and the orange represents the injury rate for performing arts. Here we do see that the injury rate for performing arts is well below the all BC injury rate, which is definitely a positive. But something to pay attention to is the fact that the injury rate for performing arts is increasing and approaching the all BC injury rate. So that is something to note. I know Krista did mention the definition for injury rate earlier, but I can go ahead and let you know the definition just as a revision. The injury rate is the number of time loss claims per 100 person years of covered employment, where 100 person years is equivalent of 100 employees working in that year. And here we have live performance venue. As you can see, live performance venue CU, the injury rate is the lowest in 2021, possibly due to the pandemic. And then the injury rate is increasingly moving upwards and passing the all BC injury rate in 2022. The good news is that the injury rate is moving downwards towards the all BC injury rate. So that is definitely a positive. Okay, and here we have organizing and special events CU. So we do see in orange that the organizing and special events injury rate is well below the all BC injury rate. However, having said that, post-pandemic, it was slowly increasing in 2023, but it is decreasing in 2024, which is definitely a positive for this CU as well. So here we have some bar graphs, and I'll be going through each CU again as well. The first CU we're going to be looking at is motion pictures, and we're looking at the total numbers of days lost within each CU and the years on the x-axis as well. So if you're wondering what the definition for total number of days lost is, it is the total number of short-term disability work day paid in a year, regardless of the year of injury. And from looking at the motion pictures CU, the highest total number of days lost looks like it is in 2020, perhaps due to the pandemic. And in 2024, the total numbers of days lost has been the lowest in the last 5 years, which is definitely a positive. So here we have performing arts CU. Here we're seeing the lowest number of days lost was during the pandemic in 2021, followed by a trend of increasing total numbers of days lost. 2024 shows the highest numbers of days lost within this particular CU. So we have live performance venue. If you're wondering what the negative values are caused by, that is, it is due to relief of costs. So that just means the costs were reversed and charged due to pre-existing conditions. But as you see within this CU, the highest total numbers of days lost is in 2024. And the total numbers of days lost we have is the lowest for 2020 and the highest for 2024. Here we're going into some pie charts, looking at claim types. So for each CU, we're going to be looking at the top 5 injuries by counts and the top 5 injuries by costs. So for this pie chart, we do see that for motion pictures, 27% of injuries make up the top 5 injuries. And 27% of injuries are overexertion, followed by struck by, which is 16%, followed by fall on the same level, 15%. If you're wondering what an example of struck by would be in motion pictures, it would be an example would be a performer hit by a falling stage prop or lighting fixture. And if you're wondering what's an example of struck against would be, that would be something like a stagehand pinned between a rolling set wall and a fixed stage wall. So we have motion pictures again, and it's the top 5 injuries by cost. So the top injury that we see here is leading the way is overexertion, which is 26%, followed by fall on the same level, 18%, and then fall from elevation, which is 14%, struck by 13%, and MVI 8%. So for performing arts, the top injuries by count, we have 17%. There's other bodily motion and fall on the same level. And if you're wondering what other bodily motions, what the definitions for that is, it includes repetitive motion injuries, struck bys, involuntary motion, and exposure to heat or cold. Okay, and we have performing arts, injuries by costs. As you can see, almost half of the injuries, 37% is made up due to fall on elevation, followed by repetitive motion, 16%, overexertion, 11%, and MBI and struck bys at 6%. Okay, and we have performing venues, top 5 injuries by counts. So the top injury by counts, we have 25% of led by overexertion, followed by struck bys, 23%, and fall on the same level at 13%, and then fall from elevation and struck against at 10% as well. Okay, and we have performing venues, and now we have the top 5 injuries by costs. We have the top costs rounding out to 23% for involuntary motion and fall from elevation at 23%, followed by 14% overexertion, and then 11% falls on the same level, and then acts of violence for 10%. If you're wondering what involuntary motion, what the definition for that would be, that means it's the movement or body parts that happens without a person's conscious control or intention. So for example, breathing, reflex actions, etc. Here we have organizing and special events, the top 5 injury counts, and we have fall on same level, leading the way at 25%, followed by overexertion, 19%, and struck by 19%. Then we have struck against at 11% and fall from elevation at 8%. And we have organizing and special events by cost, so top 5 injuries by cost again. And you can see that MVIs, motor vehicle incidents, cover almost half of the costs. So we're at 46% with MVIs, followed by falls on the same level, 17%, overexertion, 7%, acts of violence, force, and struck by at both 6%. Now we're going to be looking at claim types by occupations. So what types of occupations within each CU make up what percentages of claims. To start off with, we have motion pictures. And as you can see, the top occupation claim types consists of supporting occupations in motion pictures, broadcasting, photography, and performing arts, followed by other technical and coordinating occupations in motion pictures, broadcasting, and performing arts, followed by carpenters. So if you're wondering what support occupations in motion pictures, broadcasting, photography, and performing arts, what the definition for that is, this occupational group includes workers who perform support duties related to broadcasting and to the production of motion pictures and performing arts. And that includes occupations such as boom grips, camera crane operators, dresser and motion pictures, broadcasting, performing arts, lighting assistants, production assistants, projectionists, prompters, props persons, script assistants, set builders, special effects assistants, spotlight operators, and stagehands. So here we have young worker claim counts. And the number of young worker claim counts definition is the number of short-term disability, fatal, and LTD claims that have been submitted by young workers. So for this particular CU for motion pictures, the number of young worker claims is 126 out of 2,280 within the motion picture CU. And we have performing arts here, top 5 claim types by occupations. Leading the way, we have other performers, followed by dancers, other technical coordinating occupations in the motion pictures, broadcasting, and performing arts. If you're wondering what other performer means, this occupational group includes circus performers, magicians, models, puppeteers, and other performers that are not classified, such as stunt performers. And here we have the young worker claim counts for performing arts. And as you can see, there has been 10 out of 24 claim counts for young workers. Here we have claim types for by occupation for live performance venue, and leading the way we have support occupations in motion pictures, broadcasting, photography, followed by other technical coordinating occupations in motion pictures, broadcasting, and performing arts, followed by carpenters, and then actors and comedians and bartenders. Now we have young worker claim counts. There were 16 young worker claim counts that were submitted out of the total number of 65 claims that were submitted within this CU. Okay, and we have organizing and special events. Leading the way, we have organizing and event planners, followed by support occupations in motion pictures, broadcasting, photography, and performing arts. Organizing and event planners taking the lead as the top occupation to submit the most claims for this particular CU. And here we have organizing and special events. There were 16 young worker claims, which were submitted out of the total number of 65 claims. Okay, so now we're going to be going through some resources related to prevention. So WorkSafeBC's industry homepage is another great source of information. With links to all our industry health and safety pages, as well as to all our health and safety association pages. At this industry homepage, we also have a tool to help you better understand the health and safety issues at your workplace. And the My Health and Safety Resource online tool, it helps identify any hazards and risks that may exist in your workplace and can provide a summarized report of health and safety resource topics that could help you. And so the WorkSafeBC e-news is a great way to keep up to date with any regulatory changes. By signing up for one or more of the various health and safety e-news blasts, you'll be receiving ongoing notifications about upcoming regulation change and any future directions that we have. We also regularly update our health and safety resource collection on WorkSafeBC.com. So that is another great resource for you to have a look at. And these resources are available to help improve the health and safety of the performance and to prevent any injury in the workplace. So it's definitely very helpful. Krista, we'll be handing it back off to you to review any resources that you have.
Sounds good. Thank you, Disha. Now that we've seen some of the numbers, let's talk about return to work. So as we saw in Disha's slides, that motion pictures had 31,000 days lost in 2024. Performing arts saw a significant spike in days lost from 492 to 1,662 in 2024. And Live performance was similar to recent years, still lost 1,430 days. And rising in the last couple of years, organizing and special events had 487 in 2022, 1,197 in 2023, and 1,341 in 2024. So the impact of time loss injuries is significant for both workers and employers. When you consider lost productivity and the cost of hiring and training new workers, the impact on employers can be several times greater than the direct claim costs. We know that time off work to recover is necessary in some cases. We also know that prolonged time away from work can hinder a worker's recovery. This is why return to work planning is so important in an injured worker's recovery, and why early intervention and maintaining a connection to the workplace is critical to improving recovery and return to work outcomes. Return to work planning starts in the workplace with the worker and employer, usually the supervisor or return to work coordinator at the center of the process. The process starts with a clear procedure for reporting the injury and discussing next steps with the injured worker. Second, make a special offer of suitable work. When appropriate, have the discussion with the injured worker before they leave the workplace and put the offer in writing so they can review it and, if needed, discuss it with their healthcare provider. Third, work together to build a return to work plan that reflects the worker's current abilities and, where appropriate, incorporates input from the healthcare provider. Continue to monitor and troubleshoot, recognizing that even the most carefully considered plans may need adjusting. Communicate and adjust the plan as the worker's function improves. Finally, follow up with the worker once they've returned to their pre-injury duties to ensure full recovery and no re-injury. You can also find additional education tools and resources for both physical and psychological injuries on our Return to Work information hub at WorkSafeBC.com. Here you can also find WorkSafeBC's new Return to Work planning tool that is set to launch this summer. In addition to the Return to Work planning tool, we have a new employer guide, Managing a Safe Return to Work, that includes tips and templates to help you develop a seamless process for managing workplace injuries and helping your employers get back to work safely. Another tool for employers who have designated return to work coordinators, established procedures for injury management, and an inventory of suitable work they can offer. We have an early access to physiotherapy program, or EAPP. For those that qualify, you can partner with physiotherapy clinics in your area. The clinic will provide an assessment of the injured worker within 72 hours of the injury, complete a functional abilities form within 24 hours of the initial assessment, and, if the claim is allowed, can provide on-site coaching at the employer's job site for return to work planning and support. Check back on the hub regularly as resources are continually updated and revised. If you have a question or would like additional training and education on return to work planning, identify options for suitable work, or understanding your return to work requirements, our consultation education team is here to help. And their contact information is there on the screen. That brings us to the end of the rate session presentation. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Krista and Disha. We're now going to move on to our question and answer period. And we have some questions here in the chat. So I will go to the first one. Will an information quick sheet for the information session be provided after the session?
I'm not aware of an information quick sheet, but as far as I understand, Marit, if you can confirm that the presentation slides will be made available.
The presentation, well, this webinar will be made available. Okay, the next question. You indicated the base rate increased by 8% due to rising claim costs. Is this rising claims cost just for this CU? Also, if you could explain what new capping limits means in relation to that same slide.
So I believe that's to one of my slides, the motion picture, commercial or television production cost components. And the increase by 8% is the base rate, which means it's applicable to the CU, yes, to motion picture, commercial or television production. And with relation to capping limits is the new capping limit. So in previous years, we've capped rate increases and rate decreases at 20%, whereas this year we've done things a bit different, and increases have been limited to 10%, and decreases were allowed up to 40%. And for motion picture, commercial, or television production, the increase was limited by 42 cents.
Kieran, you had something to say?
I just wanted to add to a part of the question. I think the person asked that if the claim is the 8% due to rising claims costs, and are the rising claims costs just for this TU. So this classification unit is also its own rate group. So its claim costs are for this CU and rate group only. So we have seen an increase in the claim cost for this industry, which is represented by its own rate group and classification unit. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, experience rating. Can you please explain how this relates to motion picture production, since many of the companies starting new production companies for each production, each season of a production, so they are short-term?
I can take that. WorkSafeBC requires 3 years of claims history in order to calculate an experience rating. And I can offer a link to and that can be put in the chat that can provide additional information on experience rating. That if someone also has something more specific, we can take it offline to determine their eligibility for experience rating.
Thank you. How does WorkSafe handle return to work for short-term employers, like those that generally exist in motion picture, performing arts, and live entertainment? If an employer no longer exists when the worker is ready to return to work, what happens?
Krista, do you want me to take that on?
Yes, please. I believe it's referring to one of your slides. Yes.
Yeah, so I was able to connect with my colleagues from the claims data department for this question. And this is not my area of expertise, so if there's any follow-up questions, please do let me know. A key thing to keep in mind is that all claims that are adjudicated on their own merit, so they can be a little different depending on their own unique circumstances. But generally, the costs associated with a claim, including when the employee was a temporary worker, if they continue to impact the experience rating of the employer, or they were working at the time of the injury. In other words, generally speaking, if claims costs go beyond their employment, WorkSafeBC, they're still covering the cost for the injury, and those costs are still to be charged to the employer. But for several reasons, claims can become no return to work. So the reasons why someone should not return they're not available on our website, but WorkSafeBC does collect these reasons, and they could be such things as looking for work, or coded as non-cooperation, or medically not able to, amongst others. In the case of someone who wasn't permanently employed, they could be looking for work. That's how they would be coded. As I mentioned, every case is different. So please just take this as general information. I think a key thing to point out is that this is partially why, for many reasons, safety is important, whether employees are temporary or permanent, regardless of the length of contract.
Thank you, Disha. If a person comes from another country to temporarily work in British Columbia, is that person covered by WorkSafeBC while employed in BC?
Yes, go ahead, Disha.
Oh, sorry, Kieran, go ahead. Do you want?
Oh, I was just gonna say that in general, all workers are covered if they're working in BC. So if your worker is physically present in BC, regardless of where they're coming from or their country of origin, they would be covered as per the original or the historic agreement, as we call it. But for any specific questions like that, where you're not sure, it's always best to connect with our Employer Services Center, and they can help you determine whether you need to register or whether your workers are covered or not covered.
Okay, the next question is almost identical to that, so please just tell me if you've already covered that. Are workers from another country who sustain an injury, illness, or disease while working in BC entitled to the same worker compensation benefits as other BC workers?
Yes, every worker is entitled to the same benefits and coverage. So in general, yes, that's correct. Again, there could be some exceptions, and in that case, it's best to connect with our Employer Services Center on a one-on-one basis.
Thank you. So we don't have any more questions. Does anybody have any other questions they'd like to ask? Okay, Krista have put up a link to us internally here at and we're just working out how to change the link name. But we'll just move on to the next. Oh, okay, Trina has a question. With regards to the number of days lost for performing arts / live events CUs, could that also be driven by an increase in the number of employers and the number of workers growing significantly in the last few years? The industry has been booming, but not necessarily getting less safe.
Would be a reason. Seeing this within these particular CUs, especially for performing arts and live events. But no, that's definitely a good point. I think that would be probably considered as well.
Thank you, Disha. I think you had a problem with your mic there. It cut out.
Oh,
At least
sorry. No, I was just agreeing to Trina's comment there. That could definitely be a reason because of the increase in the numbers of employers and workers. That could definitely be a reason for the increase in days of lost for performing arts and live events.
Thank you, Disha. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so please, everybody, feel free to contact us at ActSafe, myself, Mariah Alexander, or Kaylee Hoot. We're both safety advisors, and you can call us, you can email us, and we will answer your presentation. I mean, we will answer your questions and concerns. And we can also pass stuff on to WorkSafe if you have something a bit more specific that you need answered. So thank you so much, Krista and Disha and Kieran. And please get in touch with any further questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Have a great rest of your day.